Hey guys, it is Tim and James with Tabletop Terrors, and this is episode 2 of our D&D Basics series, so buckle right in. Are you buckled in?
I'm buckled in. I got my polysaccharides.
That
was a word you said.
I know. We were talking about something else before this. So, this is episode 2, and the thing to know is that we're just going to kind of talk you through this. We're kind of doing this as we think of it to say, okay, if I were learning this, what would I want to kind of know about?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that you will eventually need to know if you want to really get into tabletop role-playing games and Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition specifically.
But this is still more of the high-level stuff, though we do want to introduce a little more of the crunchy...
Concrete.
Concrete is way better.
Concrete. So we're talking a lot of...
high concept stuff.
I forgot that word.
Yep.
High concept stuff. But we're going to mention a few concrete things that will apply later.
Yes. So there are 3 things we want to talk about that we think, okay, these are, if you look at a table of people playing D&D, these are kind of the 3 main things that if you know, you can at least fake your way around and go, oh, I kind of know what's happening here.
Exactly.
Thing 1 is the Dungeon Master. You usually see this person behind a screen kind of casting actual spells. No. You see this person behind a screen sort of running the game, and we'll talk about that. The second thing is dice. Dice of all shapes and sizes, which can be sort of confusing or intimidating.
Yeah, mostly the same shapes and roughly the same size.
No way, dude. They're all different shapes and sizes. There was a dice so big I was in it. No. The other thing is you're going to see players with character sheets or playing characters. And so we're going to kind of talk about those 3 linchpins so you can at least get the canvas of what's happening at a D&D table.
Exactly. So we want to start off with...
I think we should start off with the Dungeon Master.
Perfect.
And kind of just talk about what that is. So how do you want to do that?
So the Dungeon Master is one of the people at the table. In fact, everybody, in my opinion, at the table is a player, even the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master is the referee. They're the person that says, okay, this is what happens, and then you as a player with your character will say, okay, well, my character wants to do this thing. I want to sprint and jump over this barrel.
Exactly.
It's up to the referee or Dungeon Master to say, okay, the barrel is about this tall, and so it'll take, this thing. You're going to have to, your character has to be this good at this in order to do that.
Right. So to use some examples from our last video, the Dungeon Master, after kind of discussing it with the players in most cases, would say, okay, this adventure is going to be at the at Hogwarts, the Wizarding School of Hogwarts. So then you get to make your characters that would be at Hogwarts. But I get to say, okay, and then they're going to face this challenge. There's going to be a troll in the basement, that kind of stuff.
It's usually up to the Dungeon Master to plan those things or to find pre-written adventures and, have all of this information laid out in front of them before the players sit down so that they know roughly what's going to happen when the players start making decisions.
And think about it this way. If we're telling a story, all stories have a genre and a tone and that kind of thing. The Dungeon Master decides the genre and tone. It's almost like if you were in a library, the Dungeon Master gets to pick the book you're going to play, if that makes sense. Like, we're going to do a Western, they adjudicate that tone and style.
Exactly. Usually everyone will agree. If one person doesn't want to play a Western, maybe you can find some middle ground. It's still collaborative.
Exactly.
It's usually up to the Dungeon Master to say, I have this Western adventure. Do you guys want to play it?
Right. And so there's much more to it than that, but just think of them as the person that makes the final call when it might come to an impasse where I think one thing and you think another, and the rules, which are generalized to fit a multitude of scenarios, don't clearly state it. There's a saying in Dungeons & Dragons, and it is Rule 0 is the Dungeon Master is always right.
Exactly.
So that person just kind of makes the final call and guides everybody along.
They're the referee. I feel like that sums it up so perfectly.
Yep, so there you go. So that's the Dungeon Master. Next, we're going to talk about dice. Now, I think everyone has seen a regular 6-sided dice.
Well, and to be pedantic for a moment here.
Can I pour these out and make a dice sound?
Yes.
Okay. That was awful. I got to roll them. I'm sorry. You're going to hear this a lot when you play it. That was better. We'll work on it.
So, the important thing I want to bring up, because this is how I understand it,
Tell me.
I want to keep you from sounding like you don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Neither do I. I've always been told that if it's singular, it is a die. No matter what, this is one die or two dice. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, why? What did I say?
You just said this is a dice. And I'm like, well, it's not. It's like saying this is a mice.
But I thought I said this is a 6-sided... Oh, you're right. I said a 6-sided dice.
And I just wanted to say it so that the whole time people are trying to learn Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they're not mad because
He's not wrong. He's not
because
wrong.
Tim, they're like screaming at their screen.
This guy on the internet told me that this was a 6-sided dice. See, but I think... Well, anyway. That is one of the popular ones. You've seen this in, like, any board game.
Monopoly.
Yeah.
Sorry. The craps tables.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The 6-sided die is probably the most common in popular culture that I can think of.
Exactly. So what do dice represent in games? Well, it's the element of chance to see if something happens so that there's, I don't know, it's kind of fun when you don't know the exact outcome and there is that element of chance so that it's not just me versus you and our words.
It removes the burden from somebody deciding what happens.
Love that. Gosh, that's why I keep you around, buddy. So, why are there so many other dice? Well, if this die is a 1 in 6 chance to get a certain result, you're going to see, oh, look, I've got a fistful of dice. That's our friend on YouTube. All these different dice, now I'm overthinking saying
like every time
dice. All these different dice have multiple different numbers of sides. So like this one has 4 sides. So this is a 1 in 4 chance, which means the probability changes. I have a 1 in 4 chance. So I rolled it in the dice tray. The reason why you'd use multiple dice is different things are going to have a better or worse chance. Can I tell them what the most popular die?
Absolutely.
This is a 20-sided die, also known as a D20. When you roll a D20, it's a 1 in 20 chance of a certain result, which is obviously way different than this D4, which has a 1 in 4 chance.
Exactly. I completely forgot what I was going to say. So the important thing is about these dice, they all have different numbers of sides, and usually the way we refer to them is putting a D in front of the amount of sides it has. So he called it a D20, and in the same way, it would be a D6 would be a 6-sided die. If you were rolling 2 6-sided dice, you would say 2d6.
Exactly.
It's a thing that can sound daunting at first, but then as soon as you know that, it's like, that's
easy.
As simple as it gets.
So let's throw this at you real quick. The denomination, so that they know, I'm not going to hold every single one up, but there's a D4, which is 4 sided.
They just won't be able to see.
Yeah. There's a D4, I will. There's a D4, which is 4-sided, a D6, which is 6-sided, a D8, which is 8-sided, a D10, obviously, which is 10-sided, a D12, and then the D20. So those are the denominations, and those can represent different things in the game, like this little D4 is the amount of damage that a dagger does. So you could see that if I have a dagger as a weapon, the maximum I could do is 4, and then anything my character might add to that. But if I have a weapon that does D12, well, obviously the chance of me doing higher damage is immediately higher and goes further than that 4.
Exactly.
So the dice are cool. They're fun. I like to have multiple sets for different characters and to roll them. But that is a basic overview of what the dice are for. It's that adding that. How did you word it?
Removing the burden for someone to decide the exact outcome of something.
Perfect.
I'm sure there's a better way to word it. Also, I said it better earlier, but that's the idea.
So, if the dungeon master is telling the story and is the referee, and then the dice kind of inject the random element of just in case, like, I mess up terribly or do really well, the next thing would be the character sheet, right?
Exactly. The characters that the other people at the table are playing.
Exactly. So, do you want to go into the basic details of what a character is? Like the high-level explanation?
Yeah, so I mean very high level. A character sheet is basically usually a sheet of paper with all of your statistics on it. It tells you how strong you are, how fast you are, how smart or stupid you are,
right.
How many hit points you have. Things as simple as what your name is and what race and class you are. Basically, all of the information about your character. This isn't stuff that you have to keep in mind. I mean, you might know that your character, Grognak the Orc, is very strong, but you wrote down what his strength score was so that you remember it every time you play.
Exactly. So what we're doing with a character sheet is quantifying how good you are at certain things within the rule set of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Exactly.
And so here's the tricky part. We don't want to go too far in depth because that is probably going to be in the character creation portion, or we're not sure exactly how we're going to do the next video. But what I think we're going to do is have a blank character sheet and then play out scenarios where we use different parts of it and fill it in and stuff, maybe.
Yeah, and so actually another thing that I'll bring up, a very sort of high concept about the character sheet is it can look complicated. Suddenly I feel very sad that we don't have a character sheet here to show you that it can look a little daunting.
You know what I'll do? I'll superimpose one.
He's going to superimpose one. So a character sheet, when you look at it, looks like, some of the most difficult homework you might have ever done.
Like a tax form.
Like a tax form.
Like, what am I doing my taxes?
A tax form with slightly better art, usually.
Yeah.
But the important thing that I'll mention is your character has these main ability scores. There are 6 of them, and that sort of dictates almost everything else. If you figure those scores out, 90% of the rest of your character sheet is either something that's predetermined already, your name, or this is how well you do it because your strength is this.
Exactly.
So it's less of a figuring out an equation and more of extrapolating information to say, okay, I'm this strong, so I'm this good at swimming. And that's really it. Like you said, with those 3 things, you have the dungeon master, and they referee everything. You have the dice, and then you have the players. Sort of knowing that, you're basically there. That's Dungeons and Dragons. If you're outside looking, like you said, at people sitting at a table, you can usually figure out which one the dungeon master is, who the players are.
Yep.
And then if you were able to look at people's character sheets, you could see how strong, fast, smart, and whatnot they were.
Exactly. And then that is the basic framework that kind of gets you through a game. The DM comes up with the challenges. What's on your character sheet says how the rules dictate you can meet those challenges, and what special abilities, because you're supposed to be above average as a D&D adventurer. It tells you what you can do better than others and better than average. And then the dice is sort of that middle ground. If I have an ability that says, oh, well, you're really good at climbing, and the DM says, okay, well, this wall's going to be really hard to climb. Now, that's when the die comes into play, and I go, all right, well, let's see how well I do this time. And then I roll this, and then I would look at my character sheet and say, okay, well, I have these abilities. Factor in this roll, the little bit of probability, and you tell me what happens, Dungeon Master.
Exactly. So when you roll the dice, more often than not, you add some other number to it, and whatever that is, that can get a little complicated, and there are a lot of things there. But the important thing to realize is it doesn't come entirely to chance, and it doesn't come entirely to the Dungeon Master. There is, like you said, your character is good at things.
Exactly.
Another thing I feel like I should mention is you mentioned the rules, and okay, so I want to do this, I want to swim, or I want to do that. The thing that I will say is, and I feel like this is, you always mention the downvote machine, the thumbs down.
Oh, the thumbs down machine gun.
This is my thumbs down machine gun moment. Maybe not. If you see the books for a game like Dungeons and Dragons, they are very thick. They're probably 300 pages. This isn't 300 pages of rules. You don't need to look through and figure all of these out. A lot of a game like this, because it's so much, you can do anything. It's a lot more reference. It's a lot more like, hey, this skill is would encompass all of these things. But, you're smart, so you can say, well, if I'm, my perception, it's like, well, that would be how good you are at seeing something. So I'm like, anytime you're looking at something, you're like, I want to look over across the room.
Exactly.
It's more like guidelines rather than like, all right, so if you want to look at something, you have to do this. But if you want to look up close at something, it's a different number. It's not all that complicated.
Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition specifically leaves narrative leeway in a lot of their rules. So when you're reading the rules, they purposefully build in a little bit of room for interpretation in many cases.
Exactly.
Because of what you're saying. Because you want to be able to have the liberty and the freedom to tell that cool story. And then when you need the rules to kind of guide you along or adjudicate a challenge or, make something fair or, that's when it's like, oh, okay, well, this is how it is. And part of the fun is on the fly coming up with something that might not be necessarily how the rule is written, but that everyone at the table is like, oh, that would be awesome for right now. Yeah, let's do it that way.
Exactly, because that is what allows you to do whatever you want. Just like in a video game, there are certain walls you can't go over. The beauty of Dungeons and Dragons is you can go over just about every wall as long as you roll high enough.
Exactly. So there's one final thing in this portion of the video that we want to kind of not get through. There's one
Get to. I thought
get
you were going
to.
for
I think I was going to say
cover.
Yes. There are not any winners or losers in this game. It's more about the experience together and telling that story.
Exactly.
So it's not a player versus player game.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a good way to do it. I think you worded it at one point. It's not competitive.
It's cooperative.
It's cooperative. So the players and the dungeon master, while there is a chance of death and a chance of failure, and sometimes those can be some of the coolest character moments, the dungeon master's job isn't to try to beat you by killing you or trapping you. It's to try to work with you to tell the best story.
Exactly. A good way to put it is, in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf dies. Spoiler alert.
Oh, no.
The idea is
Tolkien would be furious.
Gandalf... okay, so this is a bad idea. We're going to go with Boromir. Boromir, because Gandalf didn't actually die, whatever. More spoilers. Hey, guys, watch Lord of the Rings. Boromir, at the end of the film, dies. He gets shot by a lot of arrows, but he goes down valiantly. Now, the important thing is he was in a situation where he couldn't really beat all of his opponents. But winning for that movie as a whole, say this movie is your game that you're playing, it was better for the story that Boromir died rather than him rolling really high every time, killing everybody, and bringing the ring to Mordor himself. So you're trying to come out with the best story usually, rather than trying to make sure your character stays alive at all costs. Even at the cost of narrative.
Right. No, I love that. And so, telling the best story as defined by you and your group is really the most important thing. And the amount of rules that you use as defined by you and your group is entirely up to you. So
just like there are no winners and losers, there is no right or wrong way to play if you and the people you're playing with agree on it.
Exactly. So that wraps up this portion of the video. I think we're going to do one final thing to kind of close things out, to give you a little something more to dig into. So let's go from there. All right, so what we're going to do, we want to start incorporating more of the actual rules for D&D 5th edition into these videos. So we're going to talk to you about the 6 ability scores that would identify and define how your character can interact in the world. Like
Exactly.
how good they are at stuff.
These 6 scores are sort of the building blocks of everything else to come. These 6 scores dictate just about everything else, whether it's how good you are at drinking or how well you are, how strong you are. And
Exactly.
it encompasses everything so that you can do anything.
Love that. So the first one is strength. Strength measures your physical power in the world. Superman or the Hulk would be super strong and have a really high ability score in strength. What's the second one?
Dexterity measures your agility or quickness. Now, the Flash would have a ridiculous dexterity because he can run really fast, but someone like the Dread Pirate Roberts from Princess Bride, who doesn't run at superhuman speed but is an amazing sword fighter, would have a high dexterity.
Exactly.
He would jump around and do flips and things like that.
And so the third one is constitution. This is like your endurance or your overall
Health.
vigor.
Vigor, vitality. V-words.
V-words. So if you have a character who could withstand a snake bite longer than others, or
Chuck Norris has a high constitution.
yes, he does. I'm thinking Snake Plissken in Escape from New York. He's got that virus in him, and he's like all fluish and has a fever, but he's still like whooping booties.
Escape from L.A.
Well, both.
He has a virus in the first one?
Dude, it's the same movie, just not as good. I enjoy
It's funny because
both.
I love the second one more because I grew up with that one.
Totally understand, and I don't.
But he
mind
does. Snake Plissken has a high
constitution because he can go through all of that.
So then we have intelligence, and this measures reasoning and memory. And this is very specific because there's one later. It's a little different. But it's the idea, it's how well you can solve puzzles and how well you can remember things. So
Like how smart you are, like book smart, like
exactly.
knowledge, like
So, oh man.
an MIT graduate,
There we go. I was trying to think of
an
someone
engineer
specific.
who can look at something and write you like a schematic.
Exactly.
Has a
Mathematicians would have a high intelligence, like reasoning and memory is the best way to put it.
Exactly. So next is the one he's talking about. This comes next. This is
Tim doesn't have much of this one based on
I don't got no wisdom. Is wisdom. And wisdom is measuring your perception or your insight. So if intelligence was being able to look at that schematic and, do this, that, and the other thing, wisdom or insight might be, wow, that engineer looks like he's depressed because, he's all frumpy and he, has disheveled clothes and smells like BO.
Exactly. It's how aware your character is, or like you said, insight is a good one. That's how you would tell if someone was lying or not.
Right. And then the final one.
And then the last one is charisma. And this measures your force of personality. And it's interesting because I've never actually heard it put that way. But it's how much of a smooth talker you are.
Right.
Someone like Winston Churchill would have a high charisma, even if he doesn't have a very high constitution.
Oh, buddy.
That means he's fat. That's not fair. I don't know.
Now, here's the other thing, is that someone even like Adolf Hitler had a high charisma because he was able to command masses. So it's kind of an interesting thing because these ability scores applied to different characters is a fun thing to do and say, whoa, how would I stat them out in real life?
Exactly. And I think something that's important to mention is everything that lives and breathes, I think is a good way to put it, has these scores.
In the game.
From rats to dogs to humans to gods to angels. This is a thing that allows everybody to be put on the same playing field so you can figure out how smart is a dog versus a rat versus a human versus a demigod versus a god. It's sort of just like I said, it's the building blocks for everything else, so they give it to everything.
Exactly. So in closing, I think it would be fun to share with you something that has been on the internet for a few years, at least now. And it's explaining the D&D ability scores with tomatoes.
I love this.
It goes something like this. Strength is being able to crush a tomato. Dexterity is being able to dodge a tomato. Constitution is being able to eat a bad tomato and not get sick. Intelligence is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad. And charisma is being able to sell a fruit salad full of tomatoes. Now, I love on the Reddit post related to this, it was originally posted by someone named Tan620. I don't know if that's where it came from, but the comment right after that, read it.
The top comment is, a tomato-based fruit salad would simply be salsa, which is true.
And then the person under it said, guys, I found the bard. But hopefully that gives you a little more insight of how they kind of relate to each other and how they're a little different.
Exactly.
So this has been episode 2, and we're slowly creeping more into mechanics and full explanations of D&D 5th edition. But
I think that the next video is going to be like, listen, this is where we get real. This is like, we've gone overarching, and there will still be a lot of those things, but we'll be getting more, I think, into this is why the numbers are what they are. This is what the numbers are, but we want to build, one thing on top of it.
Exactly. In fact, I think it might even be maybe where we take a blank character sheet and slowly fill it out, explaining why and how, and using actual gameplay examples of how those things come into play. And
I think that's one of the best ways to do it. Is seeing someone make a character makes it so much easier to do it yourself.
Right, and the cool thing about that is that if we did it that way, there would be a lot of blank places on the character sheet because things don't come into play all the time.
Exactly.
So I like the idea of kind of going throughout and then, oh, hey, we need this. Now let's fill it out and explain it.
Exactly.
So anyway, we'd love for you to subscribe. We think that anyone can be creative. Anyone can play a tabletop role-playing game. They just need to be taught how. So subscribe to make sure that you get updates on the videos we're posting, and we'd love to hear your comments. I mean, what do you think about all this? Did we miss something? We got a lot of great comments on the last video.
Yeah, so comment below if you have a question specifically about stuff we covered, but maybe there's an edge case that you're curious about, and maybe it's something that you feel we may not cover, we may miss in the character sheet portion of it. If there's still something you feel you're a little confused on, bring it up, and we'll try and wrap it into some of the next stuff so that we cover everything that everybody's looking for us to cover.
Totally. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, may your dice roll high.